So we've mentioned it several times during this conversation. Alex Bregman has turned back into the Bregman that we know him to be. Dana Brown has said, as Bregman goes, so goes the team. The past few weeks have made a strong case for that. Does it make any sense to let him walk after this season?
Well, everything has its price, and you have to have a price where you're willing to walk away from the table. Dana was convenient in saying that when Bregman is piping hot. Right? We've also heard before, as Jose Altuve goes, so goes the Astros. When Yordan Alvarez goes, he carries the Astros. Team sport. Right? Barry Bonds couldn't single-handedly carry the Giants to glory back when he was peak giant-headed Barry. But Bregman, and baseball's hard. That he was so bad for so long. I mean, the first third of the season, 51 games, barely over 200. OPS right around 600. He had 14 extra base hits over his first 51 games played. Now his last 23 games played, he has 12. Batting .366. OPS much nearer to 1,000 than to 600. So how can you go from so bad for so long to just playing tremendous baseball? It happens. It's part of the game. I mentioned the prior segment. Altuve in May was just woebegone in the batter's box. Well, so far in June, he's back to being Jose Altuve, obvious all-star starter. So it's just the ebb and flow. You just hope to have more flow than ebb. Bregman was bad Bregman for more than twice as long this season than he, to this point now, has been superstar Bregman. So if he has another month at this level to kind of balance the books, well, yeah, then as Alex Bregman goes, so goes the Astros into July. And August, traditionally, the best month of Alex Bregman's career. But as Bregman goes, so goes the Astros. No, not if Altuve fades or if Alvarez has an offseason or Kyle Tucker comes back. But the guys who get up the most are supposed to do the most damage offensively. And Bregman, other than a little bit where he was dropped down to 6 in the lineup, right? He's 2-hole, 3-hole, 4-hole every day. You can't have a guy like that stinking and have your offense be elite. And the first 2 months, Bregman was rotten egg stink. Now it's the sweet smell of success.
Yeah, I mean, we just look at his last 30 games, hitting over 300, slugging almost at 500. Last 15 games, he's hitting 355, and last week he's hitting 400. Had 6 hits over the weekend in that series. We've seen this before in the playoffs in the World Series. It was him and Yordan kind of making it happen in a lot of those big games, and you can usually count on Bregman for that clutch hit. And he gives you something different than Yordan and Tucker. He's right-handed, and he's got that playoff experience. He's got a great eye at the plate. And he's a great third baseman who is typically always available, knock on wood. So, I mean, that's a big hole at third base if you move on from him. And I get it. I understand the money, but if you feel that way about Bregman, and Dana Brown hasn't just said this once, many times through the beginning of this season as they've been struggling, they've been like, who has to get going? Who's the most important guy? And he always points to Bregman. There must be just something with him in that locker room where dudes turn to Bregman, and he's a big voice. And it's hard to even think of the Astros without Alex Bregman. But, I understand that he's going to want a lot of money, and the better he plays, the more money he's going to get as we close out this season. But I don't know. I guess it's probably a Jim Crane thing, because if it's Dana Brown, Dana talks about how he watched and scouted Bregman at LSU when he was at other ball clubs. Like, Bregman's a guy that he's had an eye on for years, really respects him as a ball player. So I bet Dana does try and keep him around. It's just, is Jim Crane going to cut that check? Well, from past experience, they typically let these guys walk. So that looks like that might be Bregman's fate.
Dana Brown has also said, I'm not big on 7, 8, 10-year contracts. Bregman turns 31 opening day next year. So, of course, it's a Jim Crane level decision. It's also an Alex Bregman, Scott Boras decision. Right? Scott Boras overplayed his hand badly with multiple free agents this past offseason. A couple of them younger than Bregman. Then Matt Chapman, Blake Snell, about Bregman's age, right? Cody Bellinger, a little bit younger. If I'm sure they're going to start with, we're insistent on 10 years, right? This is an Astro lifer just this much below Altuve. No, I would not go to 7, 8 years. on Alex Bregman, taking him to 37, 38 years old. Altuve got 5 years, $125 million. If Bregman Boris would be insulted by that, I'm the Astros saying, hey, you're right to be insulted by that, but good luck to you wherever you wind up, except for when you're playing us, and we hope all bad luck for you. It's going to be a fascinating negotiation, subject, of course, to Bregman's performance over the balance of this season and who gets the negotiating edge. If Bregman winds up with big numbers, the Astros in the playoffs, and he has a good postseason. Not a great depth position, though, around Major League Baseball. Bregman's going to have suitors, but only nut jobs would be interested in the 7-8 years. Matt Chapman wound up taking 3 years, $51 million. Bregman's a better player offensively than Chapman, not quite as good defensively, but that's one recent comp. Well, I'm sure Team Alex would say, Rafael Devers got $326 million, whatever it was with the Red Sox. Yeah, well, Rafael Devers is 26 years old when he signed the extension with Boston. So, yeah, your Will Wagners, your Zach DeCenzos, your Shea Whitcombs, they're all question marks. None of them are young prodigy type guys. They're all already in their mid-20s. So it would net clearly as a talent loss. Bregman out and any one of your internal guys in. Then again, maybe one of those guys can surprise. Or as Bregman gets into his 30s, the slippage continues a little bit. And I will note, Alex Bregman been brilliant over these last 4 weeks or so, but he's not had a superstar season since 2019. That's 5 years ago. I'm not giving that guy 6, 7, 8 years when he's already in his 30s.
So from question at third base, you have a question at first base as well. For the rest of the season, it certainly appears that it'll be first baseman by committee. But for the big picture, there's still a question there. I wanted to bring something up. Yainer Diaz has not caught Framber Valdez since May 20th when he imploded versus the Angels, giving up 10 hits, 8 runs over 5 innings, including that 7-run 5th inning. That was the game where Espada and Framber both said that Framber deviated from the game plan. Since then, Framber has shrunk his ERA from 4.32 to 3.68 over those 6 games. And given that Yainer has nice speed for a guy of his build, that speed would certainly seem to be wasted, having him squat 4 out of 5 games. And even in the game on Sunday, it sure looked like Cesar Salazar was giving Framber the business mid-inning, seemingly for shaking him off. So there certainly seems to be a case that Framber needs a strong veteran presence behind the plate. Now, going back to Yainer, some of Yainer's offensive struggles have seemingly been, or at least it's been speculated, his offensive struggles were due to in part by his increased responsibility of game planning and calling. So all of this contextual information, is there a solid case for Yainer to be moved over to first in the offseason?
There's a case, but I would raise a couple of, hold that thought. He's still just 25 years old. So to let him grow into the position with the offensive upside he gives at the position where very few teams have thunder behind the plate. In the American League, the Orioles have Adley Rutschman. The Royals have Salvador Perez, and that's just about seen. So if Yainer can blossom, look, last year, and I know the demands were not those of being the primary catcher, but last year his stats were way better when he was catching than when he was DHing. This year it's flipped so far, but we're talking not quite 1/2 of a season. He caught Framber 3 times. So that Framber melted down against the Angels, was that just a bad night? I don't think there's enough evidence to say those 2 guys are a bad marriage. Maybe if it turned out to be that way, that's where your other catcher becomes the Framber guy. But I would not want to write off the notion of Yainer becoming the primary catcher here over the next several seasons, because I don't see a quality alternative. I think Caratini, who is signed through next season, is a very good complement, a backup plus. But offensively, the career resume does not suggest he could give you close to the output that Yainer is capable of. Salazar's an organizational depth type guy. But you make some trenchant points about Diaz. Wholly different players, but 35 years ago, right? Let's 30 years ago. Let's get Craig Biggio out from behind the plate because, wow, he has other dimensions of his game that we can utilize elsewhere on the field with longevity. Diaz obviously isn't that type of athlete and speed guy, but did play 7 games at first base last season. So it's not like it would be some crazy notion once Caratini gets back, if you're thinking that's a reasonable deployment, you're just not going to play Loperfido there to give Yiner that first baseman's glove. Of course, Caratini's played some first base too in Milwaukee.
Yeah, I mean, at least for another year, you have Caratini under contract. So assuming he comes back healthy here in a few weeks, it's something you can look at. But obviously they don't love Yiner over there at first base all that much, or he would have had more starts last season. So there's something to it. Yeah, I'm kind of thinking maybe Loperfido can be that guy for you at first base. At least I'm hoping. You just don't have a lot of other catching options after next year with Caratini. Maybe somebody's ready to come up in the minors. Maybe you add somebody, but long term, I wouldn't be opposed to Yiner playing first base. If they don't have a better option, I would hope they have a better option, because that's what we talk about with these analytically driven teams. Is first base they see as hey, we can find somebody that can hit. We can kind of put them over at first base and figure it out. Of course, the Astros have been a little more reluctant to do that than a lot of other clubs. Maybe that's why they went out and signed Jose Abreu, where other teams wouldn't do that. They'd feel like we can figure out first base. Let's use our money on some more prime positions. So we'll see. But yeah, I'm hoping Joey Loperfido can be the answer at first base. We'll see. And with Yiner, maybe play him over there every now and then. If you're going years in between starts at a certain position, I could imagine that's going to be tough to get in there and play. Just every now and then give him a start. But they're not going to do it this year. They have shown us that they are not interested. I don't know why, but there's a reason that they cash checks and make these decisions and not me.
As we look at, say, the 2026 Astros, what's the composition of the outfield? Right? If Kyle Tucker is a gunner, okay, then presumably there's a spot for Loperfido. I mean, Chas McCormick will be 30. Where's he at a year from now? Jake Myers, where's he at a year and a half from now? Is Jacob Melton fulfilling potential as the #1 rated prospect in the Astros overall thin system coming into the season? One of their most interesting minor leaguers to me is an outfielder, Luis Baez, because he's only 20 years old and excelling at high A ball, right? If you have enough outfield options that you're thinking, well, yeah, we like Joey's athleticism, but we want to get our best guys on the field. So Loperfido makes more sense at first base. Hence, Yiner, we see him as our catcher. But if Tucker is out of here and Jacob Melton turns out to not be much of a big leaguer, and you're going to have more outfield spots available, well, then if you're thinking Loperfido out there, then who is your first baseman? If it's Yiner, do you come up with a catcher elsewhere? So this is part of the good organizations. But you have the now, when you have the Astros and you're in a season-long race to get back to the playoffs for the 8th year in a row. Then you have your midterm and your long-term planning of roster construction and payroll and so forth. And, it'll be the bridging of the generations, the Astros' hope of winning generations of baseball to figure it out with enough right answers. And Dana Brown having another strong draft. It's still very early to say 2023 was a great draft just because Jake Bloss made one major league start. But encouraging signs. They had, 4 players now promoted to AA, which is, 1, exciting. 2, also speaks to not that much a AA or AAA that you're thinking of as major league prospects. So you can push guys along, but really good prospects should get pushed. Critics would say rushed. Critics are wrong. And you go look at Dana Brown and the Braves, how old Acuna was when he got to the big leagues, and Ozzie Albies and Austin Riley and a number of their pitchers. It's like a young student in school. If he's really sharp or she's really, really sharp, you want to challenge them. You want to push them, give them new material, not just keep them with all the average kids.
It would also seem to be a waste of Loperfido's athleticism at first, but in the short term, that could make sense. But given what we've seen from him, it's easy to see why they value his defense in the outfield. Guys, if you had to guess, if the Astros signed a big ticket free agent or semi-big ticket free agent to fill one of those 2 positions, is it most likely first or third?
I'm going to go with C, neither of the above. On that, it's a relatively weak free agent class, actually a pretty weak free agent class coming this winter. You can at least see Loperfido as an option. You could see Yiner Diaz as an option at first base that I would think would lean them against saying, let's plunk some money down on, say, a 36-year-old veteran with a great back of the baseball card. We'll call him Paul Goldschmidt in this case, the Cardinals first baseman out of the Woodlands. And then Southwest Texas State, who's a free agent. I don't think they go that way. Third base, if you're in a position where you're thinking, "We're the freaking Houston Astros. Of course our window is open. I'm still the owner, aren't I?" Do you really want to go into next season with a mishmash at first base and best prospect in spring training wins at third base? But, if you're going to pay up, then just pay Bregman if Boris and Bregman are reasonable in their demands, rather than go sign an outside free agent that you're saying, "Oh, big ticket free agent."
After what I'm seeing this year, it may not be what I would do. I wouldn't be surprised if Bregman is too expensive and he leaves. Hey, Dubon, go play some third base until we figure this position out here in the big picture, because, Dubon's playing so well that they're starting him every game. What did I say earlier? He started 14 straight games. I know third base is more of a power position, and that's not Dubon's deal, and nobody's going to walk as much as Bregman, but sometimes you gotta play who you have. And if they don't want to pay Bregman, then I wouldn't be surprised if, Dubon's the answer until they figure something else out.
Obviously, a lot of it will be dictated by what happens the rest of this season. So we'll have to see how that plays out. That's going to be that's going to be it for this episode of Stone Cold Stros. If you listen on podcast and you enjoy the show, please be sure to give us a 5-star rating. Charlie, Josh, and I will catch you next week. You don't have to wait that long to get Houston sports, because all you have to do is subscribe to Sports Map Houston and Sports Map Texans on YouTube, and we'll get more content up for you during the week. Thanks for listening. Until next time, go Stros.